Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com. On the table here in front of me is every readily available mainstream top-end speed boot offering in 2025, where today I'll be ranking them from worst to best. Keeping in mind that I'm not sure we've ever had this many strong options in the speed boot category, where while something you really like might be ranked a little bit lower, keep in mind, and I always say this whenever reviewing and comparing football boots, your own personal preferences should be a huge factor in the boots that you select. So for various reasons that we'll talk about in this video, some boots that are ranked a little bit lower could still potentially be the best ones for you. Where once you've made the right choice for you, you can pick up any of the speed boots in today's video below their normal retail prices by way of exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the links down below. And really quickly, if you guys appreciate the unsponsored, brutally honest opinions on this channel and perhaps want to see more ranking videos like this one, don't forget to drop a like and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. In last place, 13 out of 13, we have what I personally think is one of the best laceless football boots ever made in the Adidas F50 Elite Laceless, which probably makes you question, if you think they're so good, why are they ranked so low on this list? Well, that's simply down to the fact that I really don't think that a laceless upper construction is the best way to create comfort, a quality of fit, and ultimately responsiveness, which I think is so important as a characteristic in a pair of speed boots. Having said that, if you're into the whole laceless boot thing, I think there's so much to like about the laceless version of the F50, and in general, it's just a very simple, easy to get along with pair of football boots. They're lightweight, given that they fit you properly because you don't have any adjustability due to the laceless system. They are quite comfortable. The lockdown and responsiveness is decent considering the laceless design, and at $260, you're no longer paying a premium to get basically less material on the upper of the football boot. I don't think it's the best of the top-end F50 options for sure, but again, if you like the classic F50 but also despise tying your shoes, I think these are really good football boots. At the 12th spot, we have another pair of laceless F50s, this being the F50 Plus, which basically shares the exact same upper as the boots we just talked about, but of course gives you this very unique light strike insert through the forefoot with a double sole plate construction, making for a slightly elevated look and feel, and one of the most responsive, stiff feeling forefoots in a pair of football boots the world has ever seen. Not to mention, it's also the lightest speed boot currently on the market, but also quite expensive at $300. If this football boot had a lacing system similar to the regular F50 Elite or even the tongue and lacing system from the Messi variation, I genuinely think that I'd have these ranked somewhere in the top 5, but because of the fact that the laceless upper simply isn't for everybody, I do think that it really holds back the potential of what this football boot could have been. Again, if laceless boots are your thing, I think these are very intriguing, but as it is, I can't rank them any higher than 12. At the 11th spot, I've picked the Puma Ultra 5 Carbon, which similar to the F50 Plus, I think is a really technically impressive pair of football boots because of this full carbon sole plate, but also because of this one element. The boots feel so drastically different from every other football boot on the market that they might just not be everyone's cup of tea. In terms of giving you true energy return that you can feel, this is technically the most impressive carbon fiber sole plate we've ever seen on a pair of football boots, paired up with this super aggressive FG traction pattern, and you have what is on paper a beast of a pair of speed boots. However, they're very expensive at $290, and despite carbon fiber being associated with being super lightweight, it's actually one of the heaviest top-end speed boots on the market. Not to the point where they feel heavy on feet, but they're just not as light as I think a lot of people might anticipate from a football boot that looks the way that these do. From a fit and comfort perspective, because the sole plate is so stiff, it does potentially lead to complications in regards to comfort. Again, very much depending on personal preference, but particularly through the forefoot and heel, I don't find these to be anywhere near as comfortable as the plastic plated Ultra 5 Ultimate, which also costs $60 less. And in general, it's one of those football boots that I would describe as an acquired taste. If it's everything that you're looking for, you're going to love the way that they feel. But for the vast majority, they're probably not the best choice. Which brings us into the top 10, where at the 10 spot, I've picked the Skechers Razor, which I think is a very well-rounded pair of speed boots that at one point would have been ranked a little bit higher on this list, but I do think that other brands have caught up, and this particular model, even though this technically is the 1.5 variation, has been around for quite some time with little to no change, and they've simply just been overtaken. As far as high-end speed boots go, they are very well priced, making them a little bit better value for money than some of the more popular options, and certainly in terms of performance characteristics, it does everything really well. They're lightweight, the traction is aggressive, the sole plate feels responsive, the touch on the ball is quite premium, where it has this synthetic material that really reminds me of the Teijin synthetic that we used to get on the Nike Mercurial Vapor 10 from basically 11 years ago now. The one-piece upper construction fits really nicely. They have some decent width considering that they fall into the speed boot category. And overall, there's very little about these football boots to complain about other than the fact that they have a Skechers S on the side, and that's still something that a lot of people are not on board with, or at the very least aren't willing to spend a premium to then be called out by their buddies for wearing Skechers football boots. The Under Armour Shadow Elite 3 is a really unique pair of football boots that gets a lot of things right, but unfortunately doesn't get enough things right to be any higher than 9 on this list. It's one of those football boots that gets most things right, but because the standard is just so high right now, there are potentially better options depending on what you're looking for. I think a standout element of this football boot is the IntelliKnit upper, which is a knitted base with a ridge texturing that reminds me a lot of the Mercurial Superfly 5. It's soft, it's pliable, it's very comfortable on feet, but it's still not lacking in structure, meaning that when you tie the laces tight, your foot feels very secure. The boots as a whole just are very responsive in terms of moving with you, especially upon quick changes of direction, but they don't have that squeeze your foot sensation. There's a carbon element to the sole plate, even though it's nowhere near the stiffness of what you're going to find from the Ultra 5 carbon. Very responsive underfoot, a really unique bladed FG stud pattern that maybe looks crazier than it actually feels, just provides aggressive traction on firm natural grass as you would expect, and it's also less expensive than a lot of the more popular options at $220. They're definitely not as light as some of the other speed boot options on the market right now, so that's definitely one of those things that holds it back. But certainly if you're looking for a simple knitted pair of football boots that at the end of the day have speed boot characteristics, but more so just prioritize comfort, I actually think these are really, really good boots. At the 8th spot, we have the New Balance Furon V8 Elite, which I think is a really good speed boot option for somebody that likes a knitted upper, but also wants something relatively simple in terms of fit and feel, where the knitted upper does have some varying patterns throughout, but for the most part just feels thin and soft across the entire foot. It also features an off-centered lacing system, which does give you a slightly cleaner touch and striking surface across the top of the foot, which I really do like. Unlike so many football boots these days, they don't have any crazy grip texturing on the surface, so for the most part, it's been left relatively smooth. Because they're New Balance football boots, they're available in regular as well as wide fit, making them basically an option for everybody, regardless of the shape of your feet. They're lightweight, they're again less expensive than some of the more popular options out there. The sole plate feels responsive, and the stud pattern is, as you'd expect, super aggressive. For what they are, there's very little to fault them with, which is why, again, I think they're a fantastic option for somebody that just wants a simple pair of thin knitted upper speed boots. At the 7th spot, I have a pair of football boots that came out of absolutely nowhere in the Sokito Scudetta, which is a speed boot that offers all the comfort and performance characteristics you would expect from a top-end product, but at a price that is lower than you're probably used to paying, in that the Scudetta retails for what is not a low price, but certainly a less expensive price of $200. And for that money, you're going to get a super soft, thin synthetic upper that really does remind me a lot of the 2014 F50 Adizero, an all-time great pair of speed boots. You have more of a textile material as you get further back, which adds some really nice structure, a more traditional U-throat construction and central lacing system for great adjustability. The comfort and shaping for a brand you've never heard of is pretty much as good as anyone. The sole plate feels responsive. I love the fact that it has these longer blades for the FG stud pattern, something that we really don't see all that much anymore in the football boot industry. And again, for what you pay, there is very little to criticize about these football boots. Now we're getting into the territory where, depending on personal preference, you could have these much higher or much lower on the list, where at the 6th spot, I have the Mizuno Morelia Neo 4. This particular pair is the Made in Japan beta model. My personal preference as far as variants go would be the non-beta version, which features a more traditional U-throat construction and a thinner synthetic material rather than textile through the midfoot. But at the end of the day, that is very much a personal preference choice. What makes the Neo completely different from every other boot in the speed category is going to be that kangaroo leather material that you get through the forefoot, that on the Made in Japan variant in particular, while very expensive, just feels fantastic. If you want to save some money, you can of course go for the Elite variation at around the $200 mark, which is still a really good option and still kangaroo leather. The fit, the shaping, it's one of those football boots that has been around and has kind of looked the same for over 10 years now, and Mizuno, as they've always done, just continue to refine the design with each new generation. It's also kind of unique in the sense that you do have conical studs on this stud pattern rather than blades like most speed boots, which still provide plenty of bite when pushing off, but a little bit more freedom to twist and pivot. The Made in Japan model is obviously very expensive. They are some of the priciest boots in the speed category, but if you really value build quality as well as durability, I'd make the argument that they're actually worth it. There are, of course, less expensive alternatives that offer a similar combination of features. The Copa Icon 2 is the one that comes to mind, but in terms of a true speed boot, I don't think there's anything better with a leather upper than the Neo 4. Which brings us to the top 5, where at the 5 spot, I have one of my personal favorite speed boots on the market in the Adidas Messi F50 Elite, where the Messi variant of the F50 does cost a little bit more, an extra $10, nothing too crazy, but features a completely different Hybrid Touch 2.0 upper compared to all the other top-end F50 variants, which prioritize more of a thin barefoot feel. This has a little bit more of softness and cushion, and not necessarily a leather-like sensation, but certainly trends more in that direction than what you're going to find from most speed boots, in that they're just not as thin as possible like we see so often. Micro texturing on the surface for a little bit of extra grip. Messi's custom burrito style tongue with a central lacing system, which is my personal favorite, again, of all the fastening systems on the top end F50. The shaping and comfort is top notch. The boots are super lightweight. And of course, this sole plate stud pattern setup is just pure F50, and you kind of know what to expect if you're getting into a football boot like this. For the money and in terms of what it has on offer, I think it's the best in terms of giving you that little bit of padding without going for a true pair of leather football boots, while also still maintaining that speed boot feel that so many people really want these days. At the 4 spot, I have another pair of F50s, this being the plain vanilla F50 Elite, which I think is the perfect speed boot for somebody that wants that speed boot feel but doesn't really care about all the other nonsense. The design, the fit, the shaping, the lightweight construction, the fiber touch upper in general just has nice pliability. It's raw, it gives you that barefoot feel. The micro texturing adds that little bit of extra grip. The shaping is not too wide, but not too narrow, meaning that it's going to fit most people very comfortably. The heel construction, I think, is top notch. And like we just talked about, the sole plate end stud pattern is classic F50. If you've always been a fan of the F50 series, now that it's back, I do think that the standard F50 Elite is one of those football boots that, if given the chance, will not disappoint. You can't talk about speed boots without talking about the Mercurials, where at the 3 spot, surprise, surprise, I have the current crop of top-end Mercs in the mid-cut Superfly 10 and the low-cut Vapor 16 Elite. Exactly the same football boot. It's just a matter of whether or not you want this little bit of extra material around your ankle. Where, like I've said throughout this video, depending on personal preference, this could easily be your number one, and I wouldn't blame you for that. They are technically very impressive football boots with the grip knit upper, giving you that extra grip on the ball that no Mercurial ever has before. Granted, it's one of those elements that I think isn't necessarily for everybody, and if you don't like the extra grip, some of these chrome finish uppers completely eliminated altogether, even though they do cost a bit of a premium, which is a bit of a bummer, but I do kind of like the fact that Nike does give you that option of grip or no grip. They're obviously very lightweight, they fit great, they're responsive, they have that signature Mercurial feel that so many people have come to love and expect from this line. The sole plate is responsive, the FG stud pattern is super aggressive, and the 3/4 length zoom unit underfoot provides a level of underfoot cushioning that you simply will not find from any other football boot, period, let alone other speed boots. Where I've said it before, and I'll say it again, if you've always worn Mercurials and really like the way that they feel, there really isn't much of a reason to switch. Which brings us to the runner-up, previously my number one ranked speed boot last year, the Puma Ultra 5 Ultimate, which is the non-carbon plated variation of the top-end Ultra. With these being, like many boots on this list, one of those speed boots that I think just does everything super well. The traction is incredibly aggressive, the sole plate is very responsive, the fit and shaping is top-notch, they give you that thin, raw, barefoot feel on the ball. There's even extra grip on the upper that I think is pretty much on par with what you're going to find from the Mercurials. They're actually very similar in feel to the Mercs in more ways than I think a lot of people realize. Granted, in comparison to the Mercs, they are a couple extra grams heavier, which I don't necessarily view as a huge deal, but they are also less expensive at $230 full retail, but because they're not the most popular, especially at this point, you can get them deeply discounted, where this is one of those football boots that can be had for nearly half the price of most top-end speed boots. Again, they might not be the popular choice, but if you're just looking for pure performance from your speed boots, I don't think many people will be disappointed with what's on offer from the Ultra 5 Ultimate. Which of course means the number one best speed boot of 2025, in my opinion, is the new Mizuno Alpha 2, specifically the Elite variation, which is the less expensive of the two top-end models, retailing for $180. And the reason why I say that is the Made in Japan variation retails for $320 and feels, looks, and performs exactly the same way. In terms of overall value, there's obviously something to be said about Made in Japan Mizuno build quality, but quite frankly, when you're not talking about a leather upper, being that the Alpha 2 is full synthetic, I just don't think the Made in Japan route is the way to go. Where in comparison to the original Alphas, the Alpha 2s really don't look that different in typical Mizuno fashion. However, there is one major change that I think makes for the world of difference in terms of how the Alpha 2 feels and performs, and that is the Zero Glide liner that you have for the entirety of the insole and the heel liner, just like the Alpha 1, but now that lining material extends through the entire inside of the upper, making for lockdown and responsiveness that I genuinely don't think we've ever had before on a pair of speed boots, while still maintaining a level of comfort and a quality of fit that you'd of course expect from a Mizuno product. I would almost compare it to the original Mercurial Superfly, reinforced by tons of Flywire cables. Those had so much structure and felt so secure with the laces tied tight, but because of how much structure the upper had, they were brutally uncomfortable. Not the case with the Alpha 2. The deep central lacing system and U-throat construction, I think, is a breath of fresh air compared to so many speed boots that we have these days. The boots as a whole are super lightweight. You get that barefoot touch on the ball, not much in the way of extra grip, which again is a personal preference thing that I really like in a pair of speed boots, and the sole plate and stud pattern remains unchanged. Super aggressive traction. You technically don't get the Carvo insert in the forefoot on the Alpha 2 Elite compared to the Made in Japan variant. However, unlike the first generation, these definitely seem to have some added stiffness, which basically, again, makes them feel identical to the Japan variation despite missing that one element. For $180, they are the least expensive top-end speed boots on the market, and I would also argue one of the best.